Hello and welcome back. Let's see. I was asked to check into something, and it's a little something that I heard about a long time ago. It's the our military forces being brought up to the border between Canada and America. Well, I did a little looking around, and I remember hearing this story back, let's see, March or so. I think it was, and I did a little bit of digging out, checking things out, and I found a few articles. The first one I'm going to go over, it is from Military Times, and the article is actually called "The Northern Border Along Arctic, Not Southern Border, is What Worries NORAD Leaders." Now, this article goes on to talk about the opening of the Arctic and the stirring of Russian and Chinese interests along the U.S.-Canadian northern borders is a majority of worries of top officials at the U.S. Northern Command and the North American Aerospace Defense Command. Now, Air Force General Terrence O'Shannessy told senators Tuesday that geography is no longer the buffer that it once was. China and Russia both have established a noticeable stronger foothold in the Arctic along the northern approaches to the United States and Canada, O'Shannessy told the Senate Armed Service Committee February 26th. As a result, the strategic value of the Arctic as our first line of defense has reemerged, and U.S. Northcom and NORAD are taking active measures to ensure our ability to detect, detract, and defeat potential threats in the region. This article, it keeps going on, but it brings up this date. At a June 2017 conference, Major General Laurie Hummel, then Adjutant General of the Alaska National Guard, said that Russia has been bolstering its Arctic reach with more than a dozen new airfields, 16 deep water ports, tactical air power, dedicated training centers, and the stationing of paratroopers and electronic warfare units. Russia has also, they have roughly 40 ship fleet of polar icebreakers. And that came out of Senator Dan Sullivan at that hearing. Now, this is talking about the North Pole and the lands and waters up around that. It goes on to say that they're building 14 more, including nuclear-powered icebreakers, weaponized icebreakers, Sullivan said. We're finally getting our act together on that. Last year's National Defense Authorization Act authorized 6. But do we have the required capability to answer Russia? And by the way, Chinese challenge in the Arctic? So it keeps going on with that. But right now, it looks like in our military eyes, it's the Arctic that they need to worry about. Because on paper, the U.S. has 4 icebreakers, according to O'Shannessy. In reality, we have one that's actually a polar level, he said, adding that the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Polar Star is the only one operational. But at 43 years old, it also suffers constant mechanical issues. So out of the 4 we have on paper, they're saying we only have one. It's 43 years old, and yeah, it's hurting. It's an old timer. So In November, the US and its NATO allies held a massive joint exercise in the Arctic known as Trident Juncture, which focuses on preparing around naval and air force operations in freezing temperatures should the alliance need to defend the Northern Territory against an aggressor nation. And this actually even has a map that shows the North Pole, the Arctic Circle, and up there we have Denmark, Norway, Canada, Russia, and the United States all own parts in this region, which means China doesn't yet. But according to this article, China has an interest in getting some of the land in the Arctic Circle. And there's actually 2 spaces up by North Pole that are white. And according to the claim and this map, white means nothing. So that's 2 if they wanted to. So it says the Arctic is in an area that we really need to focus on and really look at investing. That is no longer a buffer zone. We need to be able to operate there. We need to be able to communicate there. We need to be able to have presence there that we have not invested in the same way that our adversaries has. And like I said, this article talks about the North Pole and the Arctic Circle as being what our military in the Pentagon and stuff is saying is the actual threat, not the American-Canadian border, as a lot of people keep saying. Well, and then we have that article, but we also have early on in the pandemic, a story came out that U.S. drops proposal to put troops at the Canadian border. And this is an article out of the Wall Street Journal. And yeah, I go around to different papers and stuff to find my information because, like I said, you can't always take one article and find the truth in that one article. You've got to bounce around, look at different things. But this story talks about how the Trump administration dropped its consideration of plans to send U.S. military forces to the Canadian border to help with efforts to combat the new pandemic, a U.S. official said Thursday, disclosing that the decision after Canadian officials had strenuously objected to the idea. So there we have the Wall Street Journal saying, and this was back in, let's see, March 26th of 2020. So that was this year. And this was back around the time, like I said, it was February, March or so that I heard about this stuff. And that story goes on to say, yes, America was looking at putting troops up there, but they were saying it was to combat the virus. Well, I don't know. How are troops with guns and stuff going to combat a virus? They're going to go out there with all kinds of disinfectant sprays and sanitizers and spray down the trees and the grass. You know, so that struck me as a little bit odd. But that now we have March 26th, a day later, a story that came out of Global News that says Trudeau says U.S. putting troops near a Canadian border would be a mistake. So Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said Friday it would be a mistake for the United States to position troops near the Canadian border. So he made it clear to the Trump administration, as Ottawa seeks clarity from Washington on any American possible plans to deploy its military. We have expressed to the United States that it would be a mistake to position troops near the Canadian border. We certainly hope they're not going to go through with that, the Prime Minister said on Friday during a daily television briefing from his Rideau Cottage residence. And he also goes on to say, we continue to engage closely and back and forth with the American administration on many, many issues around the border. And we have more information, we'll share it. So it seems funny that the United States was saying, we're going to do this to combat the virus. And like I said, how are they going to do that? Are they going to go up and disinfect the whole border? Okay. And it goes on and it talks about, the things he's saying and how they're going back and forth on talks. And then it says Ottawa was still scrambling to react to the U.S. proposal, which appeared amid a bolstering. Hold on a sec. Ottawa was still scrambling to react to the proposal, which appeared amid a bolstering the work of its domestic border service, but the potential scope of the extent of the U.S. plan to deploy its military along the world's longest undefended border remained, at least as of midday Friday, unexplained. In this article, it keeps going on talking about how they were talking back and forth. But this part got me. We have a lot of things coming in from Canada. We have trade, some illegal trade that we don't talk about. We have a very strong sanctions on some. We have very strong tariffs on dumping steel. And we don't like steel coming through our borders that's been dumped in Canada so they can avoid the tariffs. And that was coming right out of President Trump's mouth. Well, why the day before were they talking about it being the virus as the reason for wanting to put troops up on the border of America and Canada? That was just something I found a little interesting. Where they're saying, oh, well, we want to put our troops up there to prevent the virus from coming down, homeland security and all that, blah, blah. But the very next day we have, we have steel that's coming in from Canada, and we want to use our troops to stop that steel from coming in. Once again, I don't understand using military troops to prevent unwanted steel from coming into our country. If that's the case, why isn't the border with Mexico completely lined up with our military preventing drugs, sex trafficking, child trafficking, the coyotes from bringing people across? Why is that not a subject, but yet they want to use the troops at this point now, a day later, to prevent unwanted steel from coming into our country? So now we've got two different reasons for this. Well, with the person asking me to look into this, I think I found why they were asking. Because the Hal Turner radio show on October 8th this year, puts up an article Arm yourselves and prepare. China massing tens of thousands of troops in Prince Rupert and Vancouver, Canada. Invade the USA? Question mark. So, like I said, this is carrying on from the talks that were done in March. And like I said before, I heard about this I couldn't remember if it was February or March, but March sounds about right. Maybe I heard about it a little bit earlier. But as the first article I went through talked about, the national defense and all that, they're more worried about what's going on up in the Arctic than they are the actual US-Canada border. But Al Turner goes on to talk about a treaty signed in late 2000 with Canada. The People's Liberation Army of China has been quietly massing troops in Canada since the beginning of 2020, and those troops are believed to be readying for an actual military invasion of the United States. Well, I will admit this article puts up a strong viewpoint on it. And it's got some video. I've tried looking at the video, but you can't tell. I mean, the way these people are marching, the way these people are walking that's in this video, if this is the military training, man, they're in trouble. That's all I can say. So he goes on to say, while it has long been rumored that China began massing troops and armor southern Mexico for a similar invasion goal, word of such troops appearing in Canada only begun this year. So, and I do remember hearing about the tanks down in Mexico with the Chinese star or whatever it is, the rising sun or whatever it is, painted on the side. Now, why didn't we hear about mass troop deployment for that? You know, and he has a 35-second video on here, and underneath the video it says, once actual proof emerged of Chinese troops in Canada, we started digging into where they were in relation to U.S. soil and how much this could be, given that Canada was supposed to be a U.S. ally. So he has a map that shows right where they are, Vancouver, the little island and all that. And it's not too far from Washington State. And he goes, under the terms of the Foreign Investment Protection Act, FIPA, a bilateral treaty ratified with China by the Trudeau government in 2019, Chinese security forces can be stationed to Canadian soil to protect vital Chinese investment without the knowledge and consent of local authorities. And that was on January 15th of 2020, put out by the Canadian Independent Press Review. So, like I said, his article puts up a strong fight for that they are there. I mean, he does have some video. It's hard to tell if it is actual troops or not. And he goes on to talk about how one has to ask why Prime Minister Trudeau would sign such a treaty. Does Canada not have its own military to protect vital Chinese investment? Does Canada not trust its own Royal Canadian Mounted Police? Are Canadian province police forces somehow inadequate? Or did Prime Minister Trudeau somehow find that allowing China to mass troops in his country might be beneficial to himself? So he actually asked some pretty good questions. And it goes on. Oh, and get this. Canadians say they cannot go into the park because it's been taken over by People's Liberation Army. And he's talking about Stanley Park. And he shows a little map of it. And it is a pretty big little island. And from there, he goes on to a redeployment of the F-22 and the F-35s to Alaska. There was a curious story a few weeks ago about how the U.S. is redeploying F-22s and F-35s to Alaska. It didn't make any sense at the time. Why would we put some of the most advanced fighter jets all the way up there? Now we seem to know why. But at the same time, our quickest response time would come out of Alaska into the Arctic. So with the military saying, hey, the Arctic region is what we have to look at, this is starting to make sense to me too. Alaska is our quickest line of defense into what we have up in the Arctic. Heading to the North Pole, we've either got to fly all over Canada, or we could take off straight from Alaska and boom, we're there. Just a hop, skip, and jump. All right. And he goes up on a call up of 1 million reservists. There was another story back in March by ABC News about President Trump authorizing the Secretary of Defense to call up 1 million U.S. military reserves. At the time, we were told that the call up had to do with the pandemic and those troops would be able to help with the outbreak. The story just didn't hold water, wasn't nearly as bad. The pandemic weren't nearly as bad, which is true. And once again, I can understand that if we did get into a complete lockdown and everybody's forced to stay in their houses, your local police, your state police, all the departments would need some help with keeping people in their houses, making sure that only essential personnel that had to be out traveling would be out traveling. And then he goes on, he connects another piece to it. West Coast wildfires to chase population away. For months, the U.S. West Coast has been seeing furious wildfires that have burned millions of acres and destroyed tens of thousands of homes. And he goes on to talk about another YouTuber and stuff who stumbled upon what appeared to be direct energy weapons being used to start and spread those fires. His video showed U.S. satellites in space, which monitored environmental conditions in the U.S., picked up literal beams in near infrared spectrum being fired at and into the wildfires. His screenshot, and it has a screenshot of such a beam. And like I said, this is the article right off of Hal Turner. And he goes on, there's a few pictures that they kind of show beams coming down and fires going off. Now he goes on after that and he says, then Secretary of Defense Mark Esper revealed to the American people that China and Russia have weaponized space. And he specifically mentioned direct energy weapons in his address to the U.S., to the Air Force conference. In just the first 2 minutes, the Secretary of Defense repeatedly tells us that China and Russia are employing asymmetrical capabilities, and he flatly states they have weaponized space with DEWs. And there's a video that comes up from that. He's got a bunch of pictures of, right where all them fires took place. And there's a few more parts to this. Well, while I was looking it up and checking this all out, and like I said, I can see where that article brought up the old story from back in March when they were talking about putting troops on the Canadian border. I come across this Lead Stories article. Fact checks. Tens of thousands of Chinese soldiers are not quietly massing on the Canadian border, readying for invasion of the United States. This is put out 6 days. October 14th. 6 days after the other article, the one that says they are there. Well, this is just an article that is put out by a fact checker. And he goes on to say, oh, yeah, you guys, yeah, this is no. And it says, under a treaty signed in late 2019 with Canada, the People's Liberation Army of China has been quietly massing troops in Canada since the beginning of 2020. And those troops are believed to be readying for actual military force. This is what a social media user saw. And he goes on to say, simply stated, officials in Vancouver, Canada, say there are no Chinese troops amassed there. Well, according to what the article said off Hal's website, local officials and government officials are in the need to know basis. And unless they need to know, they ain't going to know. And it goes on, one says, I have not received any reports of any Chinese occupying this part of Canada. Sergeant Peter DeVeers of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police North Vancouver Detachment said. And that was over in a telephone interview. Two separate officials from the National Canada Global Affairs Department did not reply to 3 email requests for a comment. The ministry is not taking phone calls. And this guy actually goes on and he says, Hal Turner's website has been caught spreading alarmist disinformation in the past, including a claim in December 2019 that the Virginia governor had ordered plans to cut off electricity, telephones, and internet communications ahead of a statewide gun confiscation during the New Year's. It was as false as we conclude in the article titled Fake News, Virginia Government Has Not Ordered Plans to Cut Electric Phones and Internet for Gun Confiscation. And of course, the article at the end of it, it goes on to talk about who the author of this article was. So we've got that officials in the Pentagon are talking the Canadian and American border is not the border we need to really concentrate on. It's up in the Arctic. The F-22s and F-35s being deployed, brought back into service and deployed to Alaska makes sense with how close Alaska is to the Arctic Circle. I mean, the Arctic Circle goes through Alaska itself. So that would be our quickest line of defense. And that's what they were talking about in the first article I went over. So all in all, it's kind of making sense that there, if anything's ramping up, it is for protection because Russia and China has long now had interests in the Arctic. There are them 2 pieces of land that are not spoken for up there by the looks of it. And we don't know if it's land or if it's just ice pack. I mean, some maps show that, oh, look, there ain't nothing there. And some maps show, look, there's a lot of land under that ice. Kind of like with Antarctica. They have the so-called land maps, the infrared maps or whatever it is that go through the ice and they show the land. And then we've got a lot of, oh, it's just a mass quantity of ice. But now here's one whole question for everybody to think about. Gold, silver, oil, untapped resources. If you have these resources, your country becomes richer. And what would any president or any leader of any country want? To come out as someone who brought their country to the top of the food chain. The gold deposits here in America and Canada, they say, came down with the ice age. You know, when the ice sheets moved down, it moved the gold down, the water melted, blah, blah. It moved it down, it put it in the streams. And that came down from the Arctic. Now, the same thing can go on down in Antarctica. Are there unfound resources down there? What did they find down there? What are these scientists looking for down there? These are just little questions that I, you know, as I dig through things, they kind of pop up. Now, the other thing we got to look at is, yes, the northern border to the United States is the largest unprotected border in the world. But at the same time, it is part of North America. There has never really truly been a war between Canada and America. We've kind of worked together and been able to keep a peaceful border. The military being used to stop unwanted steel from coming into this country, yeah, right. Like I said, why ain't it used to stop unwanted drugs, unwanted trafficking of any sort at the Mexican border, at our southern border? Why isn't it used there? To help to fight the pandemic before the pandemic even really got big, that's a little iffy in itself too. The video of the troops marching up there on that island, it almost looked like a bunch of people with black hair put in military uniforms. There were no hats. They weren't wearing any sacks, no guns. They were just, it looked like people walking. They were not marching in order. It looked disorganized. But at the same time, you never know. They could, you know, it could have been, oh, we're going out for a walk. Highly unlikely, but yeah, if they're supposed to be in training, you'd think they'd be marching in some way, some sort of formation, carrying their backpacks because, you know, the training, carrying their weapons, fully geared out. It wouldn't just be a stroll down what looks like a stroll down the road. But once again, you never know. And then this person who asked me to look into it sends me the story out of Maine on a WABI-5. Trains transporting military tanks spotted in Herman. Don't worry, this is not an invasion. And this is becoming common all over here in America, all over YouTube. People see these videos, they see these military instruments being moved around. Instantly, alarms go off in their head, the conspiracy theories kick in. But this article goes on, Herman, Maine. People driving along Route 2 in Herman Wednesday morning may have thought the military invasion was being prepared. We are happy to report that is not the case. These tanks could be seen on a train at Northern Maine Junction this morning. According to the Maine National Guard, these howitzers are being moved out of Maine. They were being stored under contract with the federal government. They're headed on their way to Presque Isle, which, yeah, coming from up in the area, I know to get to Presque Isle, yeah, Route 2 can get you there, boys. So, you know, if these trains are being, if these howitzers were being stored, they were being refurbished, they ain't going to drive them down the road. Would be the easiest way to move a large amount of equipment like this, by train, by rail, load them up and ship them out. So they are being moved to to Presque Isle, and from there, like they said, it's going to an undisclosed location. They're going to their new homes, people. You know, if a tank or a Humvee or something like that has been out on deployment and it's been put through use, say in the middle of the desert, it's got all that sand and everything, needs to be a complete rip apart, repair, rebuild, completely refurbished, reset up. They do need to do that before they can be used again. You know, and who knows? They could have already been refurbished and just stored there. I mean, and some of these tanks actually look like they are pretty beat. So you never know what's going on with it. But at the same time, the military is not going to store everything on their military bases. They will have contracts with people, large farms who have abandoned buildings they're not using. An area in a city that's been like completely dismantled or whatever. They will find places to store their materials, their old weapons, their machinery, and that's actually a smart thing to do. So it's not on completely confined to a military base, just in case they need it. It can be close at hand. You know, you throw these things on a train, which is part of why in the old movies you see them blowing the train tracks apart. Cut off the supply. Cut it all off. That'd be one way of crippling a military. And that's the way I see it. So what we got here is I went through an article that talked about how the Arctic is the main focus, not the US-Canadian border. An article that talked about how, yes, Trump did say, let's move troops to the border, but he was saying, well, we want to do it to fight this pandemic. Okay. The very next day, there was another article put out that they were bringing up that it's to combat illegal steel coming in. Yeah, kind of don't make sense. But the thing that gets me is with everybody that lives on the American border between America and Canada, where's the videos and pictures of these people out there? You know, we have videos of trains hauling equipment. No pictures of any military being trained in the woods up in the north. I mean, come on now. They ain't going to be hiding, you know. No, they're not going to be in plain sight. But at the same time, it's people are going to see that. But yet we don't see any proof of what's going on with that. I'm not saying it's not happening. I'm not saying it is happening. I was just asked to look into this, and the information that I found out, it looks like the eyes are actually focused in on the Arctic Circle, inside of the Arctic Circle near the North Pole. And we all know that there have been all kinds of intercepts of Russian airplanes over Alaska coming into our airspace. There's been subs that's been chased away. There's been a lot that goes on up in the Bering Sea, up near the Arctic Circle. But I mean, you got to think about the Arctic Circle is here. Just off the Arctic Circle, you have Russia, you have Finland, you have Canada, you have the United States. And it's just a hop, skip, and a jump away for all them. And with them all owning land right around the North Pole, to me, that is like what's going on down in Antarctica. Every country seems to have a finger in that area. Right now, China's the only one who's not up there. But yes, we have Russia up there. We have Finland up there. We have Canada up there. We have America up there. But yet these are all people and countries that are right there with it. You see what I'm saying? So with that being said, I mean, You can look into everything yourself. I figured I'd look into this stuff for people and see what kind of information I could dig up, because this has been going on for years. It's been going on for a long time, longer than most people realize. But the excuses and the reasons given behind the troop movement, if it is happening now, are a little iffy. Like I said, how are they going to fight the pandemic? They ain't going to be able to go up and shoot this. They have to be going up there with old Indian tanks, septic, some sort of spray, and they're going to spray down the trees and the cars and whatever. I mean, if it was to fight the pandemic, we would see these troops lined up on the roadsides. We would see checkpoints coming in and out of America and into Canada. We'd see a lot more proof and a lot more information on it. It wouldn't be, oh, well, they're hiding in the woods. No, man. For an operation that big, in the eyes that we have on the ground as a community, as the way that we all are, you would see some kind of video or something out there with it. That's pretty much all I had to say on this subject. Thank you for watching. If you're new here, please subscribe, help the channel grow again. Share, like, and as always, stay safe, stay alert, and always do things the way they work best for you. Thank you.